These 10 films, well, you know the saying that there's no business like show business? Well, these did. Well, just no business, full stop, shut up. I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 films you didn't realise secretly bombed. Number 10, Fight Club. Welcome to Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is that we all pretend that Fight Club is a cult classic even though it's actually a mainstream success story, a favourite of edgy youths everywhere. David Fincher's twisted tale of twisted men and women failed to make back double its budget, which apparently is enough to mark it down as a bomb for 20th Century Fox. I know, mad, right? 40 million bones is apparently not enough. The greedy tykes they are, the lot of them. And when you look at how popular the film is now, it certainly will be viewed as a success story that polarised as many people today as it did upon its release. But in that initial year, and before the internet captured the endlessly quotable film and flung it to every corner of the globe, this was considered by executives as a bit of a bomb. Number 9, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's hard to believe that one of the most iconic, beloved, and imaginative movies of all time could ever have been anything other than a huge hit. Almost everyone around the world, from all walks of life, knows and loves the story, the songs, and the characters from this children's classic. So you'd think that Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory would have proven to be somewhat of a golden ticket for the filmmakers behind it, right? Well, there's only one apt way to put this. Oompa loompa doobity doo, I've got a profit margin for you. Oompa loompa dumpity dudget marking costs you double your budget. Yeah, that's right. Even though Willy Wonka technically made a profit at the box office of $4.5 million against a $3 million budget, it didn't actually make the studio any money. After you factor in the added costs of marketing, a movie is generally considered a flop if it doesn't earn at least twice the amount that it cost to make. Ouch, right? I probably should have explained that better in the opening entry, but never mind, moving on. It also didn't help that Roald Dahl actually boycotted the film as well, telling people not to watch it. Number 8, Blade Runner. It's difficult to talk about Blade Runner as it's not really a singular movie because technically over a period of 25 years, no less than 6 different cuts of this film have been released, and fans still argue today over which is the definitive version. However, one thing that we can all agree on is that the original cut of this was pretty lame. It's also the version that barely made back its money, only earning $32.9 million on a budget of $30 million. That's not exactly a slam dunk, right? It also actually explains why so many versions of the film are out, because this was a concerted effort by the director to get closer to his original idea and to keep the film alive through DVD and other home media sales. And when the time came for a sequel in 2017, the studio actually took a completely opposite approach, but sadly ended up with similar results. Director Denis Villeneuve was reportedly given complete creative control and a virtually unlimited budget for Blade Runner 2049, but it still failed to earn a decent wad of cash. Number 7, The Iron Giant. Although this story of a gun with a soul and the boy who learned to love him has found its rightful place in the pantheon of animated classics and still makes adults cry to this day, The Iron Giant actually failed miserably when it was released in cinemas. Costing $50 million to make, it just about scraped together $31.3 million at the box office. Now, in fairness to Warner Brothers, it was released in 1999. This meant that it was competing with both the latter half of the Disney Renaissance and the rise of Pixar and DreamWorks Animation, so of course it was going up against the toughest competition possible. It was a damn shame as well, because this sci-fi buddy comedy / Cold War paranoia thriller is one of the most deeply affecting animated movies of all time, and that ending, as I mentioned before, was utter perfection. Number 6, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life is a perfect Christmas movie, despite the fact that the majority of the film has little to do with Christmas. Rather, it takes us through the entire life of George Bailey, a man who is too kind for his own good. After years of putting other people's needs before his own, George finds himself in financial ruin and almost ends his own life. After a rookie angel helps George discover the meaning of life, which we suppose also includes the meaning of Christmas, he discovers that life can indeed be pretty wonderful after all. Oh my god, is that why they called it it that. That was sarcasm, by the way. Some people don't get it when I'm joking around. And yet, apparently, people didn't originally want such a feel-good film because this made a huge loss of $525,000, which is around $6 million in today's money for RKO Pictures. It was only by giving away the television syndication rights for cheaper than usual that the studio ensured that it would consistently rerun on TV and soon cement itself as a household favourite and as a Christmas classic, which actually feels pretty apt when you think about it. Much like George Bailey, the movie itself started out as a failure, but over time it slowly gained the love and support of a legion of fans. Number 5. Idiocracy. Speaking of frequently talked about movies, Mike Judge's Idiocracy is brought up constantly in political conversations to this very day, despite it barely having made a splash when it was released in 2006. Set in the year 2505, Idiocracy presents a frighteningly believable version of the future in which everything has been dumbed down to the lowest degree. Farmers water their crops with an energy drink, the world's most successful TV show is Ow My Balls, and the President of America is a WrestleMania winner and porn superstar. Idiocracy is now considered a comedy classic, thanks in part to its seemingly prophetic vision, but at the same time, it didn't actually get that much traction when it was first released. Actor Terry Crews has his own theory as to why the film bombed, citing interference from corporations featured in the movie such as Starbucks. Using the cafe chain's real name, they depicted it as a business that sold lattes alongside hot lattes and full-bodied lattes. Starbucks weren't too happy about being portrayed as a coffee shop that offered extra foam for $500 million, so they pressured the studio into limiting the film's release to as few theaters as legally possible and barely promoting it. And you know what? It worked. Number 4. The Big Lebowski. Even more so than Fight Club, The Big Lebowski is by far the most quotable and meme-worthy film on this list. It's just one of those rare films in which every frame is a beautiful painting and every line is an eloquent phrase. It is an insanely popular film, loved with an almost religious fervor, and I mean that literally, as there are full-blown religions based around the events of this film. Unfortunately, it was also a victim of poor timing. The Big Lebowski was released right after Titanic, one of the biggest box office success stories ever. Titanic dominated cinemas for months, leaving little room for smaller films to compete, and as a result, the Coen brothers' magnum opus remained in the shadow of James Cameron's epic romance for a long time before it finally and thankfully found its audience. Number 3. Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. I know this sounds crazy, a Batman movie that bombed, especially in this day and age where a film as dire as Justice League can make almost $660 million. It seems insane that anything featuring the Dark Knight could fail to draw crowds. But unfortunately, for this theatrical spin-off of the Batman the Animated Series, the box office returns simply weren't there. Mask of the Phantasm is probably the least well-known of the silver screen Batman films. It made $5.8 million on a budget of $6 million, costing the studio money and costing the Batman Animated Series fans the chance to ever see their hero on the big screen again, which, let me just stress, is absolutely lame. Still though, it's a brilliant feature, and if you've not already seen it, I totally recommend you giving it a watch. Number 2. The Shawshank Redemption. The Shawshank Redemption is the world's favourite movie, at least according to the IMDb rating system, and it's sitting at a pretty strong 9.2 out of 10 and has topped IMDb's top 250 for years, and with good reason, because it's bloody fantastic. Unfortunately, nobody showed it any love when it was actually on in cinemas. Despite being nominated for 7 Academy Awards, almost nobody wanted to buy a ticket to spend time in prison with Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman, and it ended 1994 as one of the biggest box office disappointments of the year. Why this was the case is actually pretty unclear. It may have been that the premise of the film sounded a lot more dark and depressing than it really was. It might be that the Stephen King work that inspired it was one of his lesser-known short stories. Whatever it was, even Morgan Freeman has his own theory, and that was that it was all down to the name. Freeman reckons that calling the movie The Shawshank Redemption was its downfall. He found the title clumsy to say and difficult to remember. He went on to state that he really believed that people would never recommend a film to their friends if they were too embarrassed to even attempt to say the name. I mean, fair play. And number 1, The Greatest Showman. Now I know what you're thinking, there is no way that The Greatest Showman bombed. We all remember having to endure the non-stop hype train that was this movie's rabid fan base in 2018. I mean, it was everywhere, it was inescapable. Yet the thing is, The Greatest Showman did actually bomb at the box office, for about 6 weeks. Now, usually you can judge a film's financial success based on how much it makes in its first week. If nobody's going to see a film in its first week, then you lose the word of mouth connections and views will always drop from there. And The Greatest Showman did not do well at all in its opening week. In fact, many had written it off as one of the biggest bombs in years after its second and third week. But then something amazing happened. After 55 days of bleeding money, it suddenly shot up to number 1 in the box office, and the earnings only grew from there. And why did this happen? I've got no clue whatsoever, and I can only assume that musical-loving fans are also hipsters and didn't want to see the film when everyone else might have. Seriously, that's my only theory. Please, if you have any more reason behind this madness, then let me know down below. Still though, as a true rags to riches, this is a wonderful tale indeed.